episode 16 of the Black Sunday tapes, classic horror. We are getting into my third or fourth favorite Universal monster, continuing down this Universal monster path. That brings us to 1941's The Wolfman. Now, just like all the other Universal Monster films, I've seen this one countless times. Fun fact, this is actually the first ever Universal Monster film I saw. So even though my out-and-out favourite, is Frankenstein and the Bride, the first ever Universal Monster film I saw was The Wolfman. So it does hold a special little place in my heart, even though I definitely can see the flaws, which we're going to be getting into. But let's kick this off, Michael, with this is the first time you had seen it, and we're coming off the back of the masterpiece of the Universal films, which is The Bride of Frankenstein. That is out and out. I don't think there's any argument from anyone. The masterpiece of the whole collection is The Bride of Frankenstein. We're coming off that.
I'm getting that feeling now.
Yeah. We're coming off that. We're coming out of the 30s and into the 40s with this one. So there is a little bit of a change at Universal, which we'll get into for this. But dude, what are your just give me your thoughts. Give me your full thoughts on your first watch and how this one hit you compared to the others.
Okay. I suppose I'll get my butts out of the way now, so I can get like as effusive as I will about stuff that I genuinely loved about it.
Yes,
but the easiest way I can boil it down is we went from it like if the ending of Bride of Frankenstein is Avengers Endgame level crazy, and we're gonna use that analogy, this is like I just watched Endgame, and now you're like, let's watch Thor: The Dark World. Which is to say, not a bad film, but just leaps and bounds feels like steps back.
Something different, yeah.
And
I know where you come from.
Yeah, I mean that's the easiest way I could say it. It's because like because I don't know when we want to get into it, but like there's a lot that's a little weird and a little off-putting, at least to me, about like. It wasn't really cute the way that Chaney sort of creeper statused his way into her life to me, like at all.
Completely agree. Completely agree. So you've touched on that, but so let's start there because I think that's very interesting. Oddly, something we haven't really got into yet because we've really enjoyed all of these, right? Or more to the point, you've really enjoyed all of these.
I have.
Yeah. So coming on the Wolfman, there's obviously some stuff that doesn't gel with you.
Yeah.
So actually, I think that's a really fun road to travel. So yeah, let's go down that road where obviously you're saying Chaney getting into kind of getting the story underway in a way and going after the love interest in quite a creepy way. I completely agree with you. I do think that I don't know if that held up in the 40s. I can imagine maybe it did just based on other stuff I've seen from the 40s, not even horror, just film in general. There is kind of that male gazing eye.
Right. No, I totally get what you're saying, but like, correct me if I'm wrong. But like the Thin Man.
Yes,
that's from the 40s. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a lot of that type of nonsense in the Thin Man. I'm gonna have to go down that hole at some point. I've seen the first one.
Yeah.
I have the set 4 of them anyway, but it's I mean, like I know the intent, especially with the softness of the way that Chaney holds his face and speaks. There's something about Chaney's voice that's very like soothing, but at the same time,
yeah. I know what you mean. So one of the places I'll take this in is I said at the top of the show, and I said it for a reason. We were coming out of the 30s, we were going into the 40s. Now, the reason why that's quite important is that Universal at the time, they had the massive juggernaut hits of Dracula, even bigger hit of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man was a hit, and The Bride of Frankenstein, massive hit, right? And they put a lot of money into this stuff. Horror was a big deal in the 30s. When we started getting into the 40s, it was still a big deal, but you would, with their main set of characters, you started getting into the sequel territory, right? Like by the time the Wolfman comes about, you had already had 3 Frankenstein films. So you had had the original Bride and Son of Frankenstein. So the last time Boris Karloff were playing a monster, you already had 3 Frankenstein films. You already had 2 Dracula films, I believe. The Invisible Man, I'm not so sure, but you had started getting into this. So horror had started, especially at Universal, it started losing its way a little bit, and I believe there was a changing of the guard for this film. I don't think this
Okay.
is the same producers at Universal as the previous ones. I could be wrong on that, so go out and double check that, people. But I believe it was a change of the guard and a complete changing of the system. So the reason why after Bride, James Wow basically stepped back, didn't return for Summer of Frankenstein, didn't return to do anything else horror related with Universal, I don't believe, was because Universal were changing their movie making model to fit more of what was known as the MGM style at the time, which was that it was more of like a factory turnout. Like directors didn't have the full creative control they had, right? It was like, we want this film, we want this star in it. Someone goes and writes this, they stars in it, blah, 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 blah. That's done. Get the next one out. It wasn't this love affair with cinema. That's why they believe James Whale's career actually dropped off, was he was someone that did relish in the creative control that Cole Lumley Jr. gave him. When Cole Lumley Jr. stepped aside, someone else took over. Didn't really work. Same could be said about Jack Pierce, even though Jack Pierce did stay on until the later part of the 40s, 50s. He, you kind of see his makeup go a bit downhill, though I do think his makeup is fantastic, which again, we'll get into in a little bit. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
there was a bit of a change in of the guard, so much so that while in Hollywood as a whole thing, horror pictures were considered the universal picture, right? There's famous quotes from other studio heads at MGM and Fox and stuff saying, we don't make horror pictures. That's Universal's thing. They were very much A pictures, right? They were very much A pictures. Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride. These were big, 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 big films. Especially like you said,
Absolutely.
especially Bride. They were big films. A lot of money thrown at them, and their stars were paid, the highest salaries in Hollywood at the time. However, we come to the 40s. We come to the Wolfman, and this is where some people say the B movie was born. So
Okay.
horror, yeah. So horror with the Wolfman and with some other stuff that, some of those lesser sequels that Universal started pushing out, especially when the, Karloff started to step in. He stepped away from the monster, and Lugosi was playing other role. I mean, he pops up in this, right? But he started playing other roles, and you didn't have the same feel. The makeup was getting worse. It was getting cheaper because they wanted to do it quicker. They didn't want to spend so much money and time on it. So yeah, they believe this is the birth of the B movie. So what's really interesting to me about that is you say that this didn't gel as well for you as the others. There were some stuff that didn't quite work. And I think that genuinely comes down to the changing of the guard, the changing of the time, the fact that this was more rushed than any of the others. This
Well, there
was
is still impressive scale and impressive
Oh,
life, you know.
there's some
Like
very impressive stuff in it.
when
And
they hit that
actually,
attic, I just went, if this is what the attic looks like, what's the rest of that shit look
yes,
like?
yeah, definitely. And
Like,
and this is definitely still a very, very important film in terms of the landscape of, if you say that what Bram Stoker done with Dracula, for instance, and then what Lugosi and Todd Browning done with Dracula, and then what James Wow and Boris Karloff would do with Frankenstein, where that would become the blueprint of vampires. Frankenstein, like that would become the blueprint of Frankenstein, as in you have Frankenstein before this, right? With the novel, but it's the film that's the icon. The Wolfman is what we know as werewolf culture. Like
pretty
what
much,
you
yeah.
you have your legends that predate this, but they're actually nothing like you think they are. Like that all comes from this. And
Hmm.
it's funny, like a lot of people would, and actually me included, like before I saw the Wolfman, before I knew the behind the scenes of the script writing process and stuff like that, I believe that the legend of the werewolf as it's presented in the Wolfman predates this by hundreds of years, right? It's a huge legend. But that isn't true. And what I mean by that is the idea of you get bitten by a werewolf and then you turn into one. That was taken straight from Dracula. That had no place in
Yeah.
werewolf
Okay.
mythology. That's taken straight from this. The famous line, the even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms. How many times have you heard that pop up in a werewolf film? Now, I believed, and I'm sure a lot of other people do, I don't know if you do, Michael, but I believe that was kind of an old saying, right? That just an old gypsy saying that predates this by hundreds of years. It isn't.
Okay.
It's saying that the
No,
screenwriter completely made up
100%.
and was completely presented in this. And, you know, again, a lot with the werewolf culture, it was just taken from here, taken from there, and it become what we now hold as gospel. As you go and make a werewolf film, someone's going to get bitten by a wolf, someone's going to turn into that wolf on a full moon, you know,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the silver to kill the wolf.
Well,
That all comes from this film. That
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
me is that's incredible, right? And I agree, this film does have some flaws. It's definitely, though I do hold it dear to my heart because it's the one that introduced me to Universal Monsters, and I think it is Jack Pierce at his, the last gasp. This is what I can do.
Oh, really?
This
Okay.
is how fucking good I am. Like he does stuff after this, but it isn't as good. It
Okay.
isn't as good. This is Jack Pierce going out with a bang, in my opinion, saying this is where I'm at. Right.
All
This is
right.
what I can do. You're getting rid of me. You're taking a cheaper, quicker method, but it ain't gonna look as good as this, and it doesn't. That yeah, I think this film has a hell of a lot of good. I think it's influenced so much. I think it's responsible for any kind of werewolf culture beyond this, any kind of werewolf tales, films, books, whatever you want beyond this, comes from this film. I think there is so much in this film to love, so much to admire. But I would be wrong if I didn't acknowledge the exact points you're bringing up.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, so going back to like the little poemy thing, um, I don't have the relationship with the film that you have. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So like I had never heard that actually in its entirety, and if I had, it
Oh,
never
okay.
really sunk
Interesting.
in. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it like hearing it, I was like, oh well, everybody's gonna like I'm certain this has been parroted other places. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I immediately listened to a commentary on it, and in the commentary they addressed this exact thing where they were saying that people like were like, no, no, it goes back to like the most ancient of ancient werewolf lore, and
Yeah.
the dude was like, nah, bro, I came up with it.
Yeah. 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 It's
So,
crazy. It's
so
crazy what he. It should be said that the screenwriter of this, Kurt
it's I believe how it's
Siadmak,
pronounced on
Siadmak.
Siadmak is I think how they said it on
Okay.
the
Okay. Well,
commentary.
we'll
Yeah,
go with that. I
we'll go with that.
do
Let's
I
yeah.
do apologize for maybe saying it wrong, but we'll go with the way it was said on the commentary. He actually escaped Germany just as Hitler was taking over,
Okay.
and the reason he took to writing this screenplay, and the reason it was, I believe it was presented to him, and it was a completely different film. The Universal actually had, we're getting to it a little bit, but Universal had actually this wasn't the first werewolf film Universal had made. They had made one before this, which we'll get into in a minute, called
Okay.
Werewolf in England. No,
Oh, I've heard
sorry,
of
Werewolf
the
of
Werewolf of
London.
London.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Werewolf of London. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but this was, yeah, that wasn't obviously nowhere near as successful as this. No one knows what that one is, but he took a lot of his inspiration from the Nazis. So, the reason he took to the whole werewolf thing is obviously, the wolves, and that they were the big symbols within Nazi culture. And he took a lot of what he had to deal with and escaping and stuff like that. And that's why he was able to put a lot of that into this screenplay. And I think it does show. I think there are times when it really does shine through. And I think if there's anything, yeah, I agree. There's some parts of it that don't hold up, as you say, the slightly creepy way he, makes it into the life of
well,
the.
I mean, just touching on that, just the
Yeah,
balls
go.
of being
Yeah,
like, "Go get me your earrings from your dresser and sell them to me," is
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not cute.
No,
But also touching on that and flipping it from her perspective, I appreciated that she was no, no, not gonna do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
No, I'm not
I
gonna hang out
completely
with you.
agree. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that because actually, I think that's one of the things that they do quite well in this film, and there is the creepy way he gets into her life, which like I said, to be fair, having seen a lot of films from the 30s and 40s, you do see stuff like that a lot. I don't know if it was
Yeah,
this cheeky way of playing it. I don't know if it was the culture back in the day. Look, that none of
probably
us were
column
alive.
A and B and a whole lot of some other stuff that we
Right,
don't know. Yeah.
exactly. So we don't know what it was like back in the day and stuff like that, and being a little bit more what we consider creepy now. Who knows? Maybe it's considered cute back then. It does definitely read a bit creepy now. But what I do really appreciate and does hold up is her reaction to it.
Oh
That
yeah.
she definitely reacts in a way where she's like, no. And then
I mean, she even
when
calls in her
she
friend at one point. Come on.
right, exactly. And when she does decide to go with him, she brings her friend along, which,
Well, and
unfortunately doesn't
touching
work
on
out
that,
well.
the
But,
lighting of the scene as the friend emerges from the shop or whatever,
oh, it's
the
incredible.
lighting in the whole movie, man, is
Oh,
just
yes.
next level.
Yeah, the use of fog, the use of the deep shadows,
The fog
the
caused a problem at
moonlight.
one
Oh,
point.
oh man, it's
You
what
know
for
the
you
story about
or
I can't
the
no, one of the I can't remember her name. I think the actress we're talking about. There's a scene where she's being chased and she like falls down and the take continues and she passed out in the fog and they wrapped the scene and everybody broke for lunch and forgot she was there
oh
until
Jesus
they
Christ
yeah
until the fog disappeared.
until later on. Yeah,
Oh
this is a
God,
story that was related in the commentary. I was like, are you kidding me?
really?
That's
Yeah. Wow.
awful. Like
Damn. Damn. Yeah, that is horrible, man. That is absolutely horrible. Jesus.
yeah.
Yeah, that is horrible. All right, dude. So we've spoke about the stuff from the top, which I think is really good. I think it is important to bring up the stuff that doesn't work, especially in this day and age that doesn't hold up. And I've done that. But like I said, I think there's a lot that does work in this film. I think there is a lot to be appreciated for. I've already touched on some of the stuff like the lore that it created around werewolf films. We'll get into the Jack Pierce makeup a little bit more in a minute. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of that, being a massive Jack Pierce fan. But what for you really works? What do you think really worked for this film? What did sing to you? Why could you watch this and maybe go back and watch it when you do the Universal Monsters films next year, let's say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely do feel that like some of the context of just everything about it and the changing the guard and everything like going on at Universal, like it'll be easy. It'll be an easier rewatch. And so like I watched it once dry, then I watched it with the commentary, and then I let it go while I was doing stuff with my notes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but like
Who, out of interest, sorry to cut you off, who was on the commentary?
it's a film historian by the name of Tom Weaver.
Oh, okay,
Like
yeah.
like he had some like the story I've already relayed, and I think I've got one or two other things from the commentary that I thought were really interesting. But as a whole, he was just kind of like, you know, behind the scenes scuttlebutt type nonsense, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah.
pops up on a few of the kind of Universal Monster retrospective type
Okay,
features that
okay.
are on the Blu-rays and you can find on YouTube and stuff like that. Yeah.
Just in terms of like what worked for me with the film as a whole, we touched upon the lighting, but like in the one scene, and we could probably do 45 minutes on the lighting in a couple of different scenes because it's that impressive.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, it really is.
just, you know, when you're using the tools at hand and you know how to light for black and white and for where to draw the eye and everything,
Uh-huh.
it just works so well, man.
Yeah, I think the cinematography is excellent and I think that goes
Hmm.
hand in hand with the direction as well. I think the direction on this film is absolutely flawless, if I'm honest. Again, there's some stuff in the screenplay, maybe that the director could have worked
Okay,
with,
so
but again,
seriously though, like, what do you mean by that? Like, how do you mean the directing is flawless? Like,
so I think
specific.
it it varies between cinematographer and director, right? But I always look at it from the way I work, right? That's just the way I know directing with cinematography. So for a little bit of a side note here, but to help better explain what I'm going to say about Wolfman, is the way I work with my cinematographer Neil on Black Mass, and we're doing Walking Against the Rain together, or the way I've worked with any cinematographer on any of my short films, is I pick all the shots, I pick where the camera goes, I pick all that stuff. I even work with them on picking lenses and stuff like that. It's not the way all directors work. Some directors don't really know their cameras and lenses and are not too bothered about like picking shots. They're more bothered about working with the actors. I try and do a bit of it all. Obviously, I work with the actors, but I do try and give the actors a bit more of a free rein than some directors do. But I pick all the shots. I give him a very grand idea of how I want it lit, but then he'll go and achieve that, right? So the way I look at cinematography is the way the scene is lit, the way the lighting cuts through the scene, the way that certain objects are lit for your perspective and for you to grab hold of them, and the way others are not because they're not that important. That to me is cinematography. Camera shots, the way the camera moves, where the camera lingers, when it doesn't linger, who it focuses on. Look, that can be cinematography, but because it's not really the way I work and because I pay extra attention to that stuff and I pick all that stuff in my films, that to me is direction. And then also the way you work with actors, right? But yeah, so what I mean by that on the Wolfman is the way it is lit, the way the cinematography works is great. Like the way like if you look at the all of the outdoor stuff, like the reveal of the Wolfman, the opening, or not the opening, but the stuff closer.
The reveal of the Wolfman, the shot that they repeat what 3-4 times? I'm sorry.
3-4 times, yeah, they do, yeah, definitely getting their money on that one.
Oh
But
yeah.
the first time they go to the gypsy camp, the like Bela Lugosi stuff, where he is the
That's a
original
great little
Wolfman.
7 lines.
Yeah. The way the light cuts through that, the way the trees are all backlit, and it works with the fog. That's great cinematography. But then for me, the way it's directed with the rolling cameras, the way that the camera holds on certain points, the way that when Bela Lugosi or when the werewolf is fighting with Lon Chaney, and then obviously you've got the dog in the scene and the
Do you know the story about that dog?
Dick cuss, but yeah, that's Lon Chaney's, or it become Lon Chaney's
It
dog.
became John
Yeah,
Shane's dog
it become
because
Lon
he
Chaney's
he
dog. Yeah,
appreciated the chutzpah of the thing that actually bit him during that
yeah,
scene.
yeah. He it was on. There's a lot of. I'll put it into the podcast for the if you actually watch the images I put on YouTube, I'll definitely add that in. But there's a lot of really really great behind the scenes shots of Lon Chaney Jr. with that dog, and
Oh,
the
right on.
not just in this film. He ended up taking that dog with him to every set. Every set that dog is in. He pops up in some of the other lesser Universal stuff with Lon Chaney. Lon Chaney, again, we're going to get into it in a little bit, but he's a bit of a lonely soul, to be honest. So yeah, the fact he took to this dog and ended up
He's
taking his
got
dog
he's
every.
got he's got the face of somebody who can act very happy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But but that's just what I mean by the directing is the way that it's very restrained in some areas. It's very the camera moves when it needs to move. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I really like the direction of this picture.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah,
That definitely makes more sense. Yeah.
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 But so I
So,
should note that the director is George Wagner, who didn't really, I mean, he's not a big name like a James Wow or a Todd Browning. He didn't make a hell of a lot of other films of note. He made some film, well, he made a lot of films actually, but by today's standard, obviously. But he was actually more known as a TV director. So in the 50s and I believe into the 60s, he directed a hell of a lot of TV. I believe he done quite a few episodes of the Batman 60s TV
oh,
series.
right on.
Yeah,
It's kind of hard to hate that show.
yeah, exactly. What's it called? They remade it a few years ago. The Man from Uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the
I
film
never
they
saw the
remade.
show or the movie, but I
Yeah,
know
same.
they were both a
Yeah,
thing. You know what
right.
I mean?
There you go. Yeah, same. Exactly the same. But he directed a few episodes of that TV show. He become known as a bit of a TV director actually. But yeah, good director, man. I would have liked to have seen him actually have a stab at a little bit more at the maybe even a little bit of the early Universal stuff where he could have a bit more control over it. So let's get into the cast. So I'm going to build up. I'm going to build up to our lead, right? We're gonna save Lon Chaney Jr. for the end. We normally start with a lead, but we're going to get there. Obviously, we've had some other of our Universal monsters pop back up in here. So I touched on Bela Lugosi. Obviously, Larry Talbot's father, Sir John, is played by Claude Rains. So
Yeah.
yeah, dude, what did you take to them?
Well, I find it interesting how quickly, or maybe it was all makeup, but like how quickly Claude Rains went from looking rather young to okay, nope, you're playing age appropriate now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, like because it wasn't that long between the two pictures, and he
No,
looks
not that long.
worlds different. Like but like his performances choices are very interesting to me, just because like they are theatrical, but they're also pretty natural. Like they're a little heightened. They're not. You're never like, that guy's a cartoon. At least I didn't feel
Yes,
that way
yeah,
in this
yeah.
one.
I agree.
But yeah,
I think
like,
he's
but I mean,
actually one of the
go ahead.
better actors in this.
Yeah,
Like I
I
really do
mean,
like.
to
I
me the
mean, I
standout.
make no
Okay.
mistake, man. I really like Claude Rains.
Oh,
Right, like
yeah,
from Casablanca to or The Invisible Man to this to Casablanca.
yeah.
Like I really really like it. I think he's a really good actor. I would say he's probably the best actor in this whole thing.
Neck and neck, or I might argue you that the Gypsy woman is
Oh
maybe a little.
yes,
To me, she's more compelling anyway.
yes,
Maybe not
yeah.
better, but more compelling. She was next level. And that actress, I can't remember her first name, but her last name's like, I believe pronounced Usmanskaya.
Upanskaya, yeah.
And like
Maria
with her,
Maria Upanskaya. Fun fact about her: I've touched on before about people going on and repeating their roles in, I believe, every single Wolfman property after this that character turns up in. She plays that character.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so she ended up, yeah, man, she ended up making that role like hers. And I agree. I really do like her. I really, really, really do like her. Especially, look, I'm probably going to get some hate for this, and I
Uh-oh,
understand it,
what did you do?
but opposite Bella Lugosi, who is like the most over the top, just
No,
yeah, just I
yeah,
don't know.
that
I don't want to
you
be like really
pretty
horrible.
much he was. No, he was like he worked for that character. To me, like I get exactly what you're saying, but also like, I mean, clearly I've never just been walking the countryside looking for a gypsy to tell my fortune. But like, I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
ever frequented carnivals, but that's a person. That's a
yeah, yeah,
person.
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
no, like but like her natural, gypsy type of the
Yes,
time, stereotype
and
or
that's why
not, we're
she
not
made
gonna
the
go
role
there,
hers,
but
man.
like,
That's why she made the role
yeah,
hers. You
yeah.
know,
Well, and
it
then an
was amazing.
actress like she with her first role got an Oscar nomination. I
Yeah,
can't
she was
recall what the film
pretty
was, but
successful.
yeah.
She was pretty successful as an, I mean, successful by the standards of a character actor, a background actor. You know, not
She
she was
wanted to be a
never a
teacher as
massive,
well,
massive star.
an acting
Yeah, she,
teacher. Yeah,
yeah, man,
because she
she's
learned the Stanislavski, I believe.
yes,
I
yeah,
believe.
she's got it
Yeah,
down, man. She's got
yeah.
it down. I really like her. I really, really do like her.
And and actually, like, she was responsible for one of my favorite sort of like interchanges in the film too. When they go to Lugosi's crypt, and like the archbishop or whatever comes down with her, and essentially it's like, you're not gonna have some giant party in for a funeral in our neck of the woods. And she just, whatever she says boils down to, well, see, that's the difference between you and us. Like, you mourn the death, we celebrate the life. And I
Yes,
really like that type of an interchange. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
yeah, I
know,
do.
man.
Yeah, I
I dug
agree.
that scene a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah.
I do. I agree. I think there's actually a lot of really nice. It's never made like a main part of the film, but I think there's a lot of nice stuff about the differences in religion, like, the differences in culture, and kind of playing on that a little bit. Yes, it is at times hammed up because of the era, but
Mm.
I do really like it. And actually, I would say that out of all of the Universal Monster stuff, and look, they remade The Invisible Man recently, and it was great. It's a great, 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 great
Mm-hmm.
film. But the Wolfman, yes, I know they did remake it. It didn't really work, but I do think
Yeah, but
there
the
is
makeup in
a.
that movie was really good. Like, that
Oh, it's
movie was
great.
enjoyable.
It's great.
It's not a
Yeah,
great movie, but
Rick
it's
Baker.
enjoyable.
Yeah, man.
Like,
Rick Baker done the makeup for that. It's
oh yeah.
absolutely outstanding. But I do think there's a take on that idea with the Wolfman. I do really like the idea of the Wolfman. I love the idea of someone struggling with
They're doing it
something
right
that's
now,
a
aren't
side
they?
of them.
With Gosling?
Apparently, I
Yeah.
mean, them. Universal monster movies are constantly in flux, right? They're constantly being remade. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
they gave the reins to Blum because Invisible Man did so well. Yeah, that's at least is what
yeah,
I was hearing slash reading
yeah.
recently.
I
Okay.
yeah. I think it is going to happen. I think it is the same director as the Invisible Man as well.
Oh,
Who's
okay.
yeah.
Who's doing the
So that'll be
Wolfman?
interesting.
Okay,
Yeah, he's doing Wolfman. Yeah, be interesting, man. Be interested to see where it goes.
absolutely.
Right, dude. So in terms of cast, that brings us on to our lead, Lon Chaney Jr.
That
We're
guy.
gonna go on a bit of a deep dive for this because he's a very interesting character.
Is he
But
like 7.5 feet tall? Because he seemed to tower over
he
everybody.
seemed very tall. Yeah, he was very tall. Yeah, he especially for the time, he was very very tall. What do you think, man? How did he play for you?
Even as kind of creepy as I found the character, like I didn't fault the performance because like I said, like he's got like a soft smile where you're like, dude, like your face says I'm being sweet, but your words and actions speak otherwise. But he's got that face. He's at that really soft smile, and like I said, there's something about his voice. I found it soothing at times.
Yeah, I
And
agree, man.
yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it there's a like a bit of a wait a minute. You're supposed to be his kid, really? You weren't contemporary. You didn't go to school together.
Yeah, no,
That's your
no,
father.
no, no.
But
Yeah, I really liked him, dude. I think he works very well, and I tell you why I think he works very well. Is because Larry Talbot he's a son who's returning to a village where he has a very famous father. He's got to try and fill in these very big shoes of a very famous, very well respected father. Now that is Lon Chaney Jr. Right now we all know, and if you don't know, his father Lon Chaney was the guy that kind of kickstarted this all off, really, in the silent era.
mm-hmm.
The man of a thousand faces, right? That's what he was known
Yes.
as, and he was a huge star. Even if you don't know who he is, you've definitely seen some of his makeup.
You've seen
He's
images, even if you've never seen the movies, for
right,
sure.
right.
Yeah.
He's Phantom of the Opera makeup
Mm-hmm.
is still the most famous Phantom of the Opera makeup. He's Hunchback of
Hunchback.
Notre Dame. Right.
Yeah.
They are, and the other thing that was famous for him, it was he come from a day and age, touched on with the Bela Lugosi stuff in Dracula, where actors done all their own makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And when one Creighton, I believe his name was, Creighton Chaney, broke into film, he was just playing bit parts. He weren't really getting anywhere. He was a good looking guy, but there was nothing overly special about him. He done a few horror type roles where he got to do his own makeup, but this was in a day and age where it was changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't really selling, wasn't really doing anything. Then Universal saw one of the pictures he done. They saw something in him. They brought him in, and as legend has it, they had him change his name to Lon Chaney Jr. to sell the idea that this was his father's son. Right. So back then, second name wasn't enough. They literally wanted to call him the exact same thing. And case in point, if you actually go and watch a lot of his Universal stuff, he isn't even billed as Lon Chaney Jr. He's billed as Lon Chaney.
Mm-hmm. I
Right. Like,
noticed.
yeah. Right. How crazy is that?
It's
This is something he suffered with. This is something he suffered with for years and years and years and years. I don't want to say quite famously, but if you start reading into kind of the history of him and stuff, after one of his films premiered, he actually tried committing suicide. Then his reasoning for it was because he said that the pressure of being the Wolfman and the pressure of trying to fill his dad's shoes was too much for him. And yeah, he was a very, very sad figure, but he put a lot of that into his characters. And there is some very, very interesting trivia around him, Michael. I don't know if you've read, and if you haven't, I know you're going to love this. And, for those of you out there that don't really know this, I know this is going to blow you away because it did for me as well. Lon Chaney Jr. holds two very distinct honors within the Universal canon. For the run of Wolfman sequels, or for the run of Universal Monster sequels, he is the only actor that played all of the roles of that original character. In that I mean, Frankenstein was eventually taken on by someone other than Boris Karloff. Dracula was eventually taken on by someone other than Bela Lugosi. Imhotep, become a completely different mummy, but the mummy was eventually taken on by someone other than Boris Karloff. The Wolfman was never taken on by anyone other than Lon Chaney during that run of sequels. The second, and maybe even more notable, is he is the only actor that has played every single Universal monster. So the mummy that took over from Boris Karloff was Lon Chaney. When Boris Karloff gave up Frankenstein, Lon Chaney's the one that took over. He even played Dracula in later films. He holds that very distinct honor. He's played every Universal monster, and some people will just discredit him. But if you actually go and look at what he does it hold up a canon to some of the original works? Probably not. But he definitely adds something to it. He definitely, like his Dracula especially, I actually quite like his Dracula. There's something in his Dracula. It's a little bit different. The Mummy's very different to Boris Karloff's one, but again, there's a little bit something in it. He even tried playing a little bit with the Frankenstein stuff. And of course, it doesn't hold up to Boris Karloff's, but he does play. He does try playing a little bit with it. And then beyond that, he then actually had a lot of success in some B movies going on into the 50s, 60s, and the 70s, I believe, and also TV. He was quite successful in TV, man. But yeah, he works for me, but he is a very tragic character. And I think he plays that very well. Apparently a very loving, very nice person to have around on set. But he was he was quite a tragic character, unfortunately, and just never got out of his father's shadow. And unfortunately, the people around him never really wanted him to, he was always chasing his father's fame. And everyone around him was trying to sell.
Cashing in on his father's fame. Yeah,
exactly, man. Yeah, but that's why I wanted to build up to him, because I thought there's something really special there in his story, and I thought we needed to take a moment. Do you know what I mean? Just to touch on his story. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe even some of the background actors, like just the life that populated it, like the people in the gypsy village. Like the guy who's tasked with telling everybody they need to get out of there because there's a werewolf who doesn't speak. He just gestures wildly, and everybody takes. Oh, that's the werewolf gesture.
That's the werewolf gesture. Definitely. There's some great players in this, some great side actors that don't normally get the credit. But yeah, I think as an ensemble, it all works, right? And it all helps flesh out our world and helps sell what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that line of helping sell, the story you're trying to tell, let's get into the Jack Pierce makeup, because I've made absolutely no secret. It's going to come to no surprise to anyone listening to this that Jack Pierce is my favorite makeup artist of all time. I think he's the greatest makeup artist of all time. I absolutely love him. I think this is one of his finest performances, especially in the. I mean, he wasn't really responsible for the special effects, but the special effects of the film, as in the long fades and stuff like that, and in this they're not as impressive anymore, but in the sequels they actually get to do some more impressive stuff. But the way, and bear in mind what Lon Chaney had to go through for that. So people didn't know, the way he done that was Lon Chaney would sit in a chair, or normally they would make him sit, right, purely from a comfortable point of view, so he was comfortable. He would sit. Jack Pierce would come in. He'd do a little bit of makeup, put on the lights, crank a bit of film, stop. Jack Pierce come in, do a bit more makeup, lights on, crank a bit of film. This will go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. This is why the transformations in this are not so much on his face and stuff like that. However, in one of the late films, they actually do it on his face. They actually do one of those really long exposures on his face of him going from just Lon Chaney Jr. to the Wolfman, and it is incredible. But yeah, I think Jack Pierce's makeup is incredible on this. And one of the things I did touch on was this wasn't Universal's first attempt at doing a werewolf film. It also wasn't Jack Pierce's. So Universal in 1935, I believe, 1936, they made a film called Werewolf of London, and Jack Pierce again was responsible for the makeup of that. And if you, not a bad film, nowhere near as iconic, obviously, as the Wolfman. But if you go and look at the makeup of that, it's very different. It's not as encompassing as the Wolfman makeup. But if you go and look, and I'll try and find some images and actually put them into the YouTube video for this. There are screen tests from that film that look very, very similar to the Wolfman. However, Universal wanted to scale it back a bit because of the actor in that lead role. They didn't want to completely cover him up. They thought, if we're paying for him and we're putting him in it,
Okay.
we still want to see some of him in the makeup. So, take some of it away and let's still see a bit of him so he can act, and we can see his face. But when it comes to Wolfman, they completely got rid of it. So the makeup you see in this actually could have happened 6 years previous, in
Yeah.
1935. And if it had, who knows? Maybe with a few changes to the Werewolf of London screenplay, it would have been
That
the
would have
big,
been, oh yeah.
that would have been the one. We would be talking about that right now, and not the Wolfman. However, we will get to that. That is a film I want to revisit and get your thoughts on. But
It's
yeah, it's
sitting
interesting.
next to me. It's literally inches away from my hip
Oh,
right now,
is it
so
in that set as well? Is
it's
it
in
in
the
that set?
set, yeah.
Yeah, man, it's not a bad film. It's not a bad film, and the Jack Pierce makeup is great, regardless. I mean, obviously, right, it's Jack
I'm
Pierce.
kind of getting that with like everything that we've seen thus far that he's worked on, and like what little of his other work that I've stumbled upon.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, you don't. I mean, in the way that you can trace, like people you love who.
yeah.
If you love practical effects, you love people who love this guy.
Oh,
Like, there's no there's no
100%.
there's no two ways about it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, the makeup he done for this was absolutely incredible, and I
Well,
do think,
one of the things I thought was so cool about it is like, I mean, yeah, it was a really good looking like HD transfer, so I don't know how much it would have been this in on like a DVD or if you were watching a God forbid like a decades old print or something.
okay,
But like the whatever animal hair he chose, it was like it you could almost feel it on the screen. It was very
I
tactile,
believe it was
you know.
yak hair
I think it was a mixture of yak and something, yeah. And he would
because
singe
it's
the ends of
very
it to give it a
coarse,
little
isn't it?
curl. Like, yeah.
Really well. I love it. I absolutely love the Wolfman design. I think it works really, really well. The only thing I will bring up is, it is said that so very famously it said that Jack Pierce never worked with prosthetics, and he never added prosthetics to his work. He done everything
Right,
on the day,
right, right, right.
cleverly built. That actually isn't exactly true, because on the Wolfman the nose was a prosthetic, but it said that Jack Pierce didn't actually make that. Someone else made that, and he just applied it every day because it was the makeup process of doing the hair already was very strenuous on
Yeah,
poor Lon
yeah.
Chaney Jr. So the idea of doing the nose every day as well was just too much. So they actually did use a little prosthetic to do the nose that sat, I think, just above the eyebrows, and then drops down into the nose. And yeah, I mean, it looks fun, right? And it works, and Jack
Uh,
Pierce does a great job at blending it
absolutely.
all together. And Lon Chaney was very much up for sitting there for hours and taking the punishment, but let's say not as much as a Boris Karloff. And it is
Hmm.
said that yeah, he and Jack Pierce did fall out some days, apparently, as legend would have it. And there were days when he thought Jack Pierce was taking a little bit too long with the makeup. But yeah, it looks great, and
There's
I'm sure he wasn't
um
complaining once the film come out.
nah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so I mean, the end result you can't really.
There you
But
go.
no, apparently like on the commentary the guy was saying that like they would um they would rib each other, and the way that like Pierce would like just get at him is he would accidentally burn him with like some curling iron that he was using to help apply
Oh
things.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that was the other thing. So you sound about the curling iron. That it actually comes back to the one of the things you said on Frankenstein and Bride about putting actors in the way of like fire, but let's say heat for this. So one
Yeah.
of the things that should be touched on is with the hair that they used. So yeah, like I said, I think it was yak hair, like you said. It was probably a combination of several different, quite coarse and quite thick hairs to get that animal the animal look to it. But to achieve the final product, it also should be mentioned that the final look you see, to achieve that, was not only applying hair with spirit gum to the face, but then every single little bit of hair would be singed with a curling iron. So literally you're putting poor Lon Chaney in the position of where you're literally burning every little part of his face. Just crazy, isn't it? Like, that would not happen. Can you imagine the insurance on that right now?
Well, it's just and not just that, but like, come on, man, like that can't be good for your lungs. That must have smelled like death for miles
Oh,
around.
it was
Like,
just not. It said that by the time the job was done and he was ready to go to set, it was so uncomfortable because the spirit gum had, just become concrete on his face at that point, and it was so itchy, but he couldn't itch it because, fear of it falling off and peeling off. And yeah, it was a horrible process, man. Absolutely horrible process. But again, look at the result. I mean, it's yeah,
yeah,
absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. It really, really is, man.
yeah.
Anything else behind the scenes trivia wise you wanted to? I've kind of touched on a few things I want to, but yeah, anything else you found interesting?
There's only like one other thing that I found actually really sort of like, oh,
Okay.
I didn't even notice that. And I won't drag it out for the entire length of the film like the guy in the commentary does, because he teases it up front and then he doesn't literally, as the credits are ending, he finally pays it off.
Oh,
And it's
really?
what's the one thing that is in every single werewolf movie that you do not see in the Wolfman?
I don't know. Go on,
The
blow me away.
answer, the moon.
See, I was gonna go there, and I'm like, I'm sure you see the moon.
No, you
Really?
don't see the
Okay,
moon.
interesting.
That's exactly it. You thought for sure you've seen the movie a bunch of times, and you're like, no, you see the moon. You feel like you see the moon, but you never see the moon.
You never actually see it.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I love that, man. That's really, really cool. That's really interesting, especially because of the lore that comes from this, right? But that's the one thing they don't put into the original. Wow.
Right?
Yeah, I love it, man. That's really, really cool. And
Yeah.
actually, what a great place to wrap the show up, right? Because we're not going to top that.
No, I don't think so.
All right, dude. I think that's a perfect time to wrap it up. Yeah, dude. I'm glad we went down this one. The Wolfman. It
Oh yeah.
like I said, it
Yeah.
in terms of monster, it probably ranks just below Frankenstein's Monster and the Bride for me, just because I
Oh,
like the idea of a character suffering with something inside of them and then committing acts that they don't really remember. I just think there's a lot you could dive in there, and especially with, if you were to remake it, I think there's a lot of interesting angles you could take with it. I think that's why I probably like it monster wise more than some of the others like Dracula or Imhotep, who's probably up there for me. But actually, in terms of film, I would probably say the Mummy ranks above this for me, and probably the Invisible Man as well in terms of overall film.
okay.
Yeah,
I
probably,
feel that.
probably. I don't know, maybe on par with Invisible Man. I think the Mummy, maybe every time I come back to the Mummy, man, I seem to like it more and more. Oddly,
Uh,
one day it's going to be my number
yeah,
one.
that was just so fun.
Yeah, every time, man. I think as you get older, you appreciate it a little bit more as well. It's a very, very mature film. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Thanks so much for joining me once again, Michael, and yeah, sending you down this Universal Monsters path. Like I said, I've wanted to speak about this for ages, so sending you down this path and getting you to talk about it with me is a dream come true for me.
All
And
right, man.
yeah, man, everyone out there listening, and like always, like every week, thank you so much for joining us. And until next week, Horror Hounds, stay safe.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.